Hello, everybody. We're back and we're coming from Marmo Plaza, and I have my brand new friend here, Marilyn Raichle, and she is a wonderful person, and we're going to be talking about some really neat things. Marilyn, how are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. We're talking about some really interesting stuff, stoicism, and now, of course, I'll butcher this whole thing, but about what it's like to not really share emotions. And we have other things to talk about. So, uh, Marilyn, tell us about your history, your background. I love that piece about your family, and in Seattle where you reside.
Yeah. So I live in Seattle. Our family's been here since 1850. And I've been my got my my career got started in the performing arts, which is unusual for our family, but it was a way of expressing emotions I wasn't allowed to express any other way.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and and in 2007, I went to graduate school thinking that I was going to continue when I came back working in the arts. And when I got back, my parents were both in the development stages of dementia. And mom had told us from the time we were young, she said, when your father and I get to Alzheimer's, I want you to walk away. There's nothing you can do. We won't remember you. We're going to be in a fine place. So don't worry about us and walk away.
Huh.
And we all thought that makes sense. So we all did. Mom and dad lived in a really good continuing care facility. They had enough money to do that, which is hard these days. Um, and um, and it was only when I got back from graduate school, there were no jobs because it was during the recession.
Hmm.
So my brothers and sisters and said, okay, we'll keep you afloat and you get to be the family caregiver. And I wasn't really the caregiver because they were living in this really great place, good assisted living facility, but I still was there. That was my new job assigned to make sure that they were comfortable and happy. And it was hard because every single day, all I heard was mom's words in the back of my mind going, walk away, walk away.
Hmm.
And it was this long process of my evolution from complete denial and resistance to acceptance to ultimately absolute joy and the single most wonderful experience I've ever had. Mother completely changed my life. I learned there was this wonderful moment years before mom and dad developed dementia. And I was living in this big house not far from where mom and dad lived. And one day, mother came to the house and I was taking a nap. And she came to my room and she laid down next to me and she told me she loved me. Now, that was a
Really?
word that was never spoken in our family. And
Huh.
all I remember is crying. And she whispered, I guess I should have said that more often. And we didn't ever talk about it, but our lives together as care partners unlocked all that love, waiting so long to express itself. And I learned how to live. So it's the best thing I ever did. And I'm eternally grateful that I got to do it.
That's incredibly powerful. That's stirring, actually. When you start talking about what it took, I guess, for your mom to walk away from tradition, right? The stoicism, don't share emotion. That's how they, live their life, and you're not, socially allowed to share, express your emotion or celebrate. Even the piece about saying "I love you," that's a lot to hold in.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot to hold
Yeah.
in.
Hmm.
I can't imagine it.
It was astonishing. And by the time mom died at 96, because this was when she was 82, um, she was in late stages of dementia. Um, and we had the most wonderful relationship. And it was just, I am such a better person as a result of this. she gave me a blueprint for living, and it was just, it was wonderful.
Now, I didn't tell you this before now, but I might as well say it now. My dad developed dementia,
Yeah.
and I had some real sweet interactions with him after he developed dementia. Very interesting because his personality totally changed. We before he developed dementia, he was, this man's man. You know what I mean? And never kind of like something like your folks don't show, emotion. Never said I love you.
Right.
Um, I know his parents. I'm sure they didn't because, and they didn't do all the touchy feely stuff either. Because I remember the first time I hugged my grandmother, Mama Times. I think she almost fainted. Uh, we were, and I was like that guy, and so she was like, and so it took a long time for her to even say in kind, "I love you," that kind of thing. She died at 93, but Daddy started to be more sentimental when he got dementia. Seems like he start talking about things that I'd never heard him talk about,
Hmm.
about me and about, different things. And it was very peculiar. I almost didn't know how to receive it, and it's like, what, and he would say stuff, and I'm like, and I know that sometimes he would say stuff. I'd be driving down the road with him going to the barber shop, who was my mother's brother's barber shop, and dad's brother-in-law, and we'd be going down there, and he'd like, "Hi, where's little Chris?"
Oh.
And I'm like, "What are you talking about, Dad?" Now, me being a therapist, psychotherapist, I'm thinking, that's the dementia,
Hmm.
Dad's seeing some of it, and he kept saying, "Well, where's little Chris?" And I'm thinking he was talking about me as a child,
Yeah.
and it took
But
a
how
while.
wonderful.
Yes, it took a while for me to figure that out. On that, I think when we got to where we were going, I finally got it, But he was like wanting what he was wanting to do was say something to my smaller version,
Yeah.
and I didn't pick that up, you know.
Oh,
It,
how.
yeah, it was like, oh my gosh, or he would like talk like it was 1965,
Hmm.
and he would say things, and I know he was saying stuff to the nurses in the hospital one time, and they're like, "Who are these people?" And I said, "Oh," I said, "He's talking about his Uncle Josh. He lived with his
Hmm.
Uncle Josh in the '60s." But here it
Well,
is,
that's great, though.
oh, like it was yesterday.
All that emotion that you never knew we were ever able to experience, you were.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
it just, I don't know. What do you think about it? Because you hear the medical community talk about dementia as some type of curse. Well, how
Oh,
did you experience it? And you've already talked about it though, but your
that drives
experience.
me nuts. Our country's commitment to the dark side of
Mm,
dementia is so strong that there are people, they're gone, they're no longer here, these lives aren't worth living. Once one of my sisters years ago said, Mom left us years ago. And I said, well, if
mm,
she left, who's there?
mm,
And I would suggest it's somebody well worth getting to know. It was, and I've never thought it was a curse. I just didn't think it was a life worth living because mother told us to walk away. But it's so strong. And one reason I wrote this book, so don't walk away, is to invite people to take a walk with me and mom, not to
mm,
tell them what it's like, but to let them experience what it's like
mm-hmm,
to live with people who are living with dementia and discover what wonderful human beings they are. And to also discover that we're talking about human beings who are just like us, who till the day we die, all of us will always experience certain things, like the need for friendship and the
mm,
need for laughter and the need
mm,
to be of value, which was huge to mom, and the need to love and to be loved. These never leave us. And it was this, and it was over 9 years that I had to learn all these lessons every single day with mom. Um, it was it was it was a miracle, really, that I mean, talk about emotionally unavailable. It was,
mm,
you know, and with mother, it was when I would tell people that I would go to assisted living to visit mom, they would look at me like I was crazy
mm,
because I would tell them how happy it made me and how relaxing it was,
mm,
and that there were no deadlines. All there was just love. Because by that time, we had a new family. Mother had a new family. It was all her friends in assisted living, all these wonderful people, and they became my family. So I had all
mm,
these adopted new mothers. And
mm,
and it was just this every day I learned something new. Um, and every day I became a better person and learned something I'd never learned, which is my job in the family. We had jobs. My job was to win. And that didn't mean listening to people, that mean winning. And
mm,
with with my time with mom, it was I learned how to listen and I learned how to ask questions.
mm,
It enabled me, it gave me a new way of living. It
mm,
in a much better. Once she there were certain things we weren't supposed to do growing up, and one was accept compliments. Because you
mm,
accepted a compliment, it indicated that you thought you deserved it. And that was a
mm,
source of pride. So
mm,
in our family, we grew up, if someone gave you a compliment, the wise choice was to change the subject, preferably to something depressing, so that they wouldn't want to do it again. And we did this. So we all got out of the habit because it was sort of like, give me a compliment. And I said, yeah, but everything's so terrible. Um, and with mom, she was giving compliments all over. She was always greet the people in the nurses and the caregivers who wore these terrible outfits. She would always tell them how beautiful they looked and what wonderful outfits they were wearing. And and I thought that was something mom did, but when I started doing it, it was like, what a wonderful way to start a conversation, to smile
right,
and give a
right.
compliment. Of course, she still couldn't accept one. If you told her she played the piano well, she deliberately hit a false note just to prove that you were wrong.
Oh my goodness.
Old habits die hard. But it was just extraordinary. And every day when I got there, because at first when I got visited mom, it was like once a week. It was like a dutiful thing I had to do once a week. By the end, I was there every single day, all day. Uh,
Mm,
because these people made me so happy, and it was so wonderful being with them, and it all changed, everything changed, because mom and I sort of, and dad and I had always had trouble, and so I wish I'd known then what I know now, because
mm,
I could have made his life so much happier. I
mm,
could have just been with him and let him know that he wasn't going to be abandoned. And
yeah.
I could have told him I loved him, which of course that would have not worked. I could have given him a shoulder massage, which he would have loved, which I did to everybody else. But it was just this incredible moment when mom began to paint. Because until then I thought she was gone, still that who the person I knew. I was still, when I would talk to mom early in my caregiving career with her, I wasn't hearing the thought, I was only hearing the confusion.
Mm,
When I looked at her, I wasn't seeing the person, I was only seeing the loss. And then when dad died, and they've been together for 72 years
mercy.
as best friends and as husband and wife. And when dad died, my brother and sister and I were in the room with him. Mom was asleep and dad was on the bed. And we thought, should we wake mom up? And we thought, she's not going to remember it. she's going to have to live through this every single day. But they've been together for 72 years. So we woke her up, and I've never, ever seen mother cry. And I have never seen tears like that ever in my life. It was just
Hmm.
extraordinary. And so the next morning, I got there early just to make sure she was okay. And she remembered, and we talked about dad and what a wonderful life they had. And the second morning, I got there early, and she remembered, and we talked about dad, what a wonderful man he was. And the third morning, I got there early, and she was lying on her bed crying, saying, I just want to be with your father. And without thinking, I
Hmm.
summoned the mother of my youth and I said, well, Mom, you should have thought of that before you started taking such good care of yourself. And she laughed and she said, well, that's life. And she put it in a little box and rejoined the world. She
Hmm.
still said, oh, Bob, 40 times a day. She was always thinking about him. He was always there. But she joined. So I took her, she was really bored. So I took her to this painting class for people with memory loss. And the painting was astonishing. She didn't
Hmm.
think that she could paint. Well, she also thought painting was stupid. And but the painting was wonderful. And that's I very quickly realized, oh, she's still here. She's still living with wit and imagination. And I started to listen. And every single time she painted for the next odd year, like 9 years, I saved them all because otherwise she'd throw them away.
Hmm.
And if I complimented her on a painting, she said, I didn't do that. But but so she wouldn't admit to painting. I don't know whether that came from her Scottish upbringing, but it was astonishing. But the paintings enabled me to see the person that I thought was gone emerge. And that changed everything. And so everything everything stemmed from the painting when I was seeing her creativity. And when she started to paint, they hold up the model on the table. She would see a model on the table. As soon as she would start to paint, she would begin to hum, and she would become so totally engaged in the act of painting. She wasn't paying attention to anything else until she finished. And then they'd make her sign it, and then she'd get up and walk away. And when sometimes she'd walk around and she'd see this group of people at the table painting, and she'd say, oh, may I join you? And she'd join them and she'd paint again. It was just it all stemmed from mother's it stemmed from our ability to share joy.
Hmm. You know, uh, I'm I'm kind of tearing up a little bit, to be honest, hearing this story because so so the brain is very amazing, and so for everybody who's listening, wherever you are in the world, consider this piece, what Marilyn is talking about. Um, and this is what the doctors, I poo poo on the doctors because they don't know everything. They think they know everything, but they don't know everything. Um, but the brain is situated in such a way that certain hemispheres do certain things. Okay.
Mhm.
And so, give an example. If you have okay, Mel Tillis, you remember Mel Tillis ages
Yeah.
ago?
Hmm.
Great country singer. Well, Mel Tillis would sing perfectly fine, no stutter. But then when he would talk, he'd stutter. Couldn't hardly
Yeah.
get two or three words together without him stuttering. And I'd often wondered about that. Well, it's for the same reason, get this, that your mom could paint without any type of impediment. It is amazing. Cognition is funny like that. Involves the prefrontal cortex, which is this part of the brain behind your forehead, which is where your driver is. That's where everything that, if I want to say I want to pick this pen up, that's where that command comes from, behind my forehead. I want to drink this cup of coffee. I want to talk to Marilyn. I want to articulate a particular concept. That all comes from here. But these other hemispheres control different things. The part that Marilyn's talking about with her mom with the painting, and the singing and the humming. It's the music center of the brain here.
Mhm.
Okay. And so when you're dealing with dementia, it affects prefrontal cortex. That's why their thoughts are scrambled. But it still doesn't do anything with this part of the brain.
Yeah.
What the hemisphere is dealing with music, art, that's why your mom could thrive. That's where you could say, oh, she's still there because she was here.
Yeah.
But the doctors won't tell you that. Yeah. That's why I was tearing up because I was thinking how good God is,
Yeah.
that He's allowed us to function in different ways with different parts of our brain and still function perfectly. That's that whole thing about, oh, you know, she's gone. She's, no, you're right. She's not gone. She's still there. So accessing that musical part, the part about, let's do some drawing. That's an amazing thing. That's what we do in therapy, by the way. When people have a lot of trauma, excuse my, yeah. But in trauma therapy, we use this hemisphere of the brain to try to recover from whatever traumatic events people have. And it actually works. But the doctors don't know that. So they
Mm.
they try to do other things, give you medicine and stuff that don't
Oh,
really
yeah.
work. But so tell us more, because I'm real intrigued. What other discoveries did you make with your mom? Um,
Well, I mean, first I have to say that with the paintings, that at the beginning when she saw a flower, she would paint a flower, and then very quickly she started to transform things so that a zucchini became a dragon, and a butternut squash became this wonderful little creature with a face that looked exactly like a blue meanie from Yellow Submarine. I call it the
really?
orange meanie, and it's over. But and then I realized I kept trying to think, what was she painting? I mean, what was she thinking? And I realized she was painting what she was feeling, not
Oh,
what was on the 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 table. Um,
oh,
there was only one thing she painted that looked exactly the way it was, which was strawberries. Because every single summer she would take us kids strawberry picking, and we would pick hundreds of pounds of strawberries. And she would bake them into jam, but that strawberry was a strawberry. She knew that one backwards and forwards. But everything else was open to interpretation. And almost, I mean, behind me on the wall is her painting of daffodils. And what's interesting is the blossoms are little snakes sticking out their tongues. So she was very mischievous. So it was always reflecting her moods. But on the other hand, we played Scrabble every single day. That was our beginning of our ritual. I would get there and I said, I'm going to beat you at Scrabble. And she'd go, not so sure. And we would play Scrabble. And she played really well. And then at the near the end of her life, we still played Scrabble. She wasn't able to make words, but all the time. But we counted up the scores of the tiles because she was so competitive. But once, what was really interesting, this was probably when she was 94 and we were playing Scrabble, and she had a hard time coming up with a word. And then all of a sudden, she just stopped and she looked at me and she said, sometimes your brain just gets in the way, and made Jewel on the triple. And so even now, when I'm having a hard time coming up with a solution, I will remember that and I will think, sometimes your brain just gets in the way, and I will stop and I will just relax. And nine times out of 10, the answer will come to me. Um,
Wow.
the other thing that I love, that this happened really early. I mean, the first thing I learned is that she was living with dementia, not suffering from it.
There you go.
Um, and that I joined her in the moment. I was
Yeah.
never trying to bring her back. I was never testing her, like, do you remember or don't you remember? It was never part of that. It was about, I want her to be able to live in the moment, and I joined her in the moment. And And I also just assumed that she would be happy to meet me, see me, because I'm her daughter. And then I realized rather quickly that far more important to her were her new companions in assisted living, that that was her new family. And they were willing to accept me as a member of their family. So I had this wonderful new family.
Mm.
And I did these, I was always doing things to make them happy. And I would start every time I visited, which was every day, I would start giving them with shoulder massages. I would ask them first, would you like a shoulder massage? And they wouldn't always know what I meant, but they'd see the person next to them swooning with pleasure and they would want one. And one day, Gloria came up to me and she gave me the best compliment I've ever received in my entire life. She said, do you tuck your wings in a handkerchief when you're not here?
Oh, nice.
Again, it was just putting aside all preconceptions, listening and joining them. And it was so happy. Um, and so these are just things I learned. I learned to ask questions. One of the things that mother would say over and over and over and over and over again, she said, what do you think Seattle is going to be like in 50 years?
Mm.
Sometimes she'd say 250 years, didn't matter. And at first, I would make up these stories because I wasn't particularly interested, but I would make up these stories and change the subject. And then one day I thought, this obviously means something to her. Ask her what she thinks. And I asked her, and all of a sudden, these wonderful, wonderful ideas started flowing out. The first thing she said was, well, maybe women will start wearing skirts again.
Mm.
And she didn't wear skirts, nobody. But, and then she said, maybe we'll all fly. And she said, it's getting bigger and bigger. There's no room. And we envisioned the water lapping up at the shores of Seattle. And she was just, and there was so much fun. And I thought, oh, think of all I missed by not asking her. So that's when I absolutely learned ask questions, listen to her. She's telling you something.
Mm-hmm.
And again, giving her the respect as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just, and then I realized that everything that so she gave me this blueprint to stop and listen and ask questions, to smile. Um, and then I realized that everything that improves the life, enriches the life of a person living with dementia, does the same thing for everybody, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started actually becoming, a much better human being, a much happier, it was just, it was just wonderful.
You know, that is a beautiful way to look at it. I love the way you articulate it, living with dementia. People tend to take things, you could take things positively or negatively, no
Yeah.
matter what you are faced with. And you're right. The medical community loves to take the dark side, the dark side of whatever. And there's always a bright side, right? Sounds like, remember, there's a song that we used to sing in church. There's a bright side somewhere.
Hmm.
And It's funny, about African Americans. We tend to always look for that, no matter how destitute
Yeah.
we are, how things have been, or whatever. And we break out in the song, in church. That's what historically have done anyway. And we'd just start singing these moving songs. Everybody would know the lyrics. And those are back in the days when you actually had a room full of people in church. Now it's sporadic.
Yeah.
And it would just be moving, and people would get caught up in the emotion and stuff. And then some people might start shouting and whatnot because of the emotionality. But, turning this, what seemingly is negative, into the positive, almost ethereal experience is something I think that we lose if we become so pragmatic, so, determined that, oh, wow, excuse me, this part of my life is over.
Yeah.
And the truth is, excuse me, like your mom, No, you're phasing into a new experience that is equally as important and enjoyable, right?
Yeah.
And experiential. And that's the beauty in all this. I think that when you start looking at how your mom is able to pull is funny because the old connections aren't necessarily there with
Right.
the old life and the family and all the things. So she created new connections to simulate what she, quote unquote, or as we would categorize, lost, as in memories. But she recreated and integrated new elements of that with her new family, i.e., the people.
Yes.
And you did something amazing, Marilyn. You integrated into the new aspect of herself, which is probably why you were able to get so many great connections out of your mom after that. I think that's profound.
Well, thank you. The other thing, she was so wonderful. The other thing that's important is that I always felt that who she was essentially was intact. That
Mm-hmm.
she was still that wonderful woman who was funny and competitive and in loving. Um, she was the only thing she still couldn't do was bake, but everything else about her essentially I felt was always there. It expressed itself differently, but and sometimes not at all because she was always. I mean, once we were walking down the hall and she said, I could smash everything I see, but I won't do that. It would be wrong. I mean, um, she was just, and all these lovely women I was with every day. Um, it was again just that one of them, Ruby, she was from Atlanta. And one day she told me that she loved mangoes and that
Mm.
mangoes were never served, And so I started bringing her mangoes and she would keep it in her room until she felt it was right. And then I would peel it for her and she could eat it. I mean, that was so simple. And again,
Yeah,
it was just a matter of listening to her and responding to her
yeah,
with respect. Respect. That's the other thing.
that's it.
Respect. Um, and so all of these things with mom, um, I mean, I wish when I would, once I did an interview with someone and I would telling her stories like I am with you about mom. And when I finished with one, she would say, yes, but isn't it awful? And I say, well, you could think so. But
Oh,
and then I would tell her, another series of stories. And then she'd say, yes, but isn't it terrible? And I just thought,
oh
okay,
no.
this is a woman who's so deeply committed to the fact that this is terrible, that I'm nothing I say is going to change her mind. But this was interesting. I was talking to somebody once, and he was telling me about visiting his wife in a nursing home. And he said, when I see her, she kisses me and she tells me she loves me. And when I look in her eyes, there's nothing there, and I leave in tears. And I thought, why is it that he couldn't see what I most likely would have, which is a woman with something to say? And if your entire framework is surrounded by loss and sorrow, that's all
Mm,
you will see. You
there
can't
you
see
go.
anything else because you're blinded by it. But if you just allow yourself once to experience them being happy, then that person you thought was gone emerges.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I would say to people, when I say to people and they have a hard time with it a lot of, it's like share joy. Well, it's not like their life is joyous and it's not like everybody should get Alzheimer's. It's that together share something that makes them happy. Like what could be singing, could be looking at the view. It could be almost anything. Just do it once for 5 minutes and you might decide that you want to do it again
Mm-hmm.
because you see that person you thought was gone still there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
It
that's
yeah.
that's it. You sold a bill of goods when it comes to that particular diagnosis. And you automatically look as though, oh, this is a terminal case. I might as well
Yeah.
just well, as you say, walk away or don't walk away, and
Yeah,
you flip it around, as your mom said a long time ago, walk away, just walk away. And you get that whole idea that, we really can't change. They kind of transitioned in a way that, yeah, we have to just reach out and connect with them in the ways that they're able to, opposed to just try to make old things work and they just don't work in the way that we think they should. But we're all multifaceted. We all have different elements and
yeah,
qualities. I think we just have to look at it in a different way, uh, or as I say, CBT it, cognitive behavioral therapy it, and flip it around and say, oh wait, this isn't so terrible,
yeah.
and not have those old somber. Because I wonder how your mom would have felt about you coming in there crying every day or whatever.
Well,
That.
she would not have understood it, and it would. The thing is that people say, well, she won't remember anyway if I visit. Well, she may not remember. Sometimes I would leave after 5 minutes. I would, after 5 minutes, realize if I left right now, she would forget that I'd been here. But it doesn't matter if she forgets that particular interaction with you. She never forgets the emotion it raised. She
That's
never
good.
forgets that. She might forget. Sometimes she didn't know who I was,
Mm,
but then she did sometimes. But she always knew she liked me. She was always
mm,
happy to see me.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it didn't matter. And she always knew that she wanted to play Scrabble. And so it was just, and once, and this after mom died, mother made me laugh on her deathbed. That's not
Really?
easy to do.
How?
Um,
Okay, tell us that story. I can't wait to
okay,
hear.
so she grew up in a banking family during the Depression and they hated Franklin Delano Roosevelt, just hated him. And so anytime she heard the word Roosevelt or saw the Roosevelt Hotel, she would say, we didn't like him. I said, I know. So her 96, her blood sugar had spiked to 600
Jesus.
and she was in a hospital. She was in a coma. They put her in a coma because they couldn't do surgery. She wouldn't have wanted that anyway. And my brother and my sister and I are standing around her and we're telling her we love her and we're singing to her. And I mentioned her dislike of the Roosevelt Hotel, and mom flinched in a coma.
No, she didn't.
I know you can't help but laugh, but then I knew she heard me and I knew she understood me. So I spent the next 2 days sitting next to her, holding her hand and talking. I never mentioned Roosevelt. That would have been wrong. But it was this such an incredible moment because even then she was funny. And and 2 days later, as soon as I could, I went back to assisted living just to be with my moms. And Ruby, who was from Atlanta, the one, and she and Evelyn, who was 104, were
Mm.
talking about mom. And Ruby held up this little red plastic flower. And she said, I think about Jean every time I see this. You want to know why? I said, why? And she said, because she tried to eat it.
Oh my gosh.
And I laughed and I felt so much happier that I was at home.
Wow. Wow. What was your mom's name, Jean?
Jean McPhee Raichle.
Jean McPhee. That's pretty amazing. You know, that's that's good. I think that's just wonderful when you start looking at different things. That 104-year-old, she got it, and was able to laugh. I think we take ourselves too seriously too when it comes to a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
and just relax. And and I think people are so uncomfortable with the unknown, can't figure out what's ahead. So we catastrophize. We just make hay, and it's not like that all the time. I think that
No.
embracing those silver linings, if I may be cliche, is important. And you find those with the plastic flower, or the flinching in the coma, or all of those things, I think, are powerful and generative. And I think, your spirit rejoices in those moments instead of being a sour person, somebody who focuses on the negative. And I really enjoyed this. This is amazing. You start talking about it and thinking about it. Now, before we go, what advice would you give anybody who has a parent or a loved one who has been experiencing dementia, Alzheimer's, or any cognitive delayed issues? What would you give them in this moment to help them soothe their minds and the way things look for their loved ones?
Well, first, I would say that realize that they're there, that the person that you love is there, not the same, there. And the most important question, most important advice would be to listen and to ask questions,
Mm.
to give them the respect of knowing they're telling you something. Listen and ask questions and really acknowledge the fact that they've told you something and respond. That's the most important thing for me. It's the most important lesson I learned with mom. I mean, I learned something, every single day, but to listen and to ask questions, um, and to enjoy the moment.
I love that. That's beautiful, Marilyn. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
it's been very nice talking to you today. How can anybody get in touch with you to read your book, find your book? And
That you can go to the book. Actually, we have a website. It's called don'twalkaway.net. And on the front, it has where you can buy the book. It has little links. You can go to Amazon, you can go to Barnes and Noble. It has information about me, about the book, about mom. And it's it's a wonder. It's a short, happy read. When you tell people I've written a book about dementia that is it's refreshingly positive and happy.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you won't cry.
I love it. All right, young lady. God bless you. This has been a beautiful day, beautiful morning, beautiful interview. I really thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be here. Thanks.
God bless.